They don't want dollars anymore. So you're going to have to open up to Bitcoin eventually. So it's the necessity that's going to make it happen. And I see us getting there simply because the dollar is dying. It looks like it's always looking like it's on its last legs for various reasons. And
Perpetually.
It's just perpetually. Every morning I wake up, I'm surprised that it's still hanging on there. So you're going to see more hard assets being sought out, which will be gold because they know gold. Gold is old. And they're going to go into Bitcoin as Bitcoin becomes more expensive. It's hard to say. Nation states may actually just buy the ETF, right? Central banks can already buy stock. If you look at the Bank of Switzerland, they made a lot of investments. They were actually hoping to weaken their currency, so they spent a lot of money and bought a bunch of stocks, and then the stocks went up. And they only strengthened their currency. So we know that they can buy anything accessible in traditional markets. And if you have an ETF, that's just another thing they can buy. Buying actual Bitcoin, holding actual Bitcoin, I think is a more difficult thing. So what we might actually see is nation-state adoption of Bitcoin through ETF buying, because it's so easy for them to do. It's already structured and lined up. They just have to push a button. So we'll see. But we know for a fact that countries do want hard assets. That's why they've been buying gold for the past few decades and accumulating. Except for Canada, we sold all the gold. But countries with some foresight and with some planning are trying to accumulate hard assets. And with the effective U.S. seizure of Russian funds in the central bank, it kind of sends a signal that the dollar is not a functional reserve currency anymore, because they're just IOUs that anyone can freeze and remove from your possession at any given time. So you're going to see more hard assets being sought out, which will be gold because they know gold. Gold is old. And they're going to go into Bitcoin as Bitcoin becomes more expensive. Because as it becomes more expensive, it becomes more valuable in their eyes. What this all means is that people are getting tired of the old system where everything changes but doesn't change. And this is why Milei can win, because people are genuinely tired of the rut that they're stuck in, and they really want things to be fixed. Because Milei should not have won by any means. He's not a real contender if you look at the political landscape, but he won. But anyways, going back to your point, he's effectively taken his own path, a more libertarian path, and it's just as valid as El Salvador Bitcoin legal tender path. So his path is deregulation of money. You can use whatever money you choose to, as long as you all agree. And that, for me, is just as good as legal tender of Bitcoin, because you can already use Bitcoin there. And they are implicitly encouraging people to form contracts. Their foreign minister, Diana, has said publicly, you can use Bitcoin or cows or milk to trade. So that is good. A free market is good. Bitcoin is free market money. So while countries can do legal tender, deregulation might actually be the easier way to go forward if you have a libertarian at the helm. But still, it's challenging to get a libertarian or a Bitcoiner president. Yeah. The path that El Salvador took is valuable still, because while they maintain Bitcoin as legal tender, that makes Bitcoin a foreign currency, which allows us at Jan 3 to pursue novel approaches with other countries that have ways to embrace foreign currency as their own currency. So that gives us the chance to work with Guatemala, and they simply acknowledge Bitcoin as a foreign currency. These are facts. There's no need for legislation. In Suriname, they have executive orders that allow the local population to use dollars and euros along with the SRD, their local currency. And they can do the same for Bitcoin because it is a foreign currency. So all of these things give us opportunities to push for more Bitcoin adoption around the world. I see Guatemala as very promising. It's a neighbor of El Salvador, and they do have this easy path to Bitcoin adoption, and they do have this grassroots community there in the form of Bitcoin Lake, where it's anchoring that Bitcoin adoption. So it's not just a president saying we're going to do Bitcoin stuff and they flip-flop. There's actually real grounding there. But Costa Rica is promising too. You have Bitcoin Jungle. All of these places have a real grassroots adoption, and I think that's the key thing to make real nation-state adoption possible.
As you look forward to the next 5 years or so, what do you see as the biggest challenge for all three of those things that we just discussed?
I would say the biggest challenge is understanding of basic economics and the attitude of protectionism, trying to control the money so you can control the people. Effectively, the governments have to understand that that is not going to work. But the question is, how long will they try it for? So we can take Nigeria as an example. They launched their CBDC, the e-Naira, and originally their website said this is for your convenience, for your security and safety, and it's completely optional. And then you saw that no one was using the e-Naira. And then they started to limit your cash withdrawals from the ATMs. And fast forward till today, they're going after on and off ramps and trying to find exchanges and penalize them. But does that actually work? Not really. You can only go so far when you're trying to stop information, but Bitcoin is unstoppable. So the question is, how far are they willing to go? Are they going to put people in jail for having Bitcoin? And that's really a question mark, because we've seen oppressive regimes just pop up magically overnight. Canada is a good example where Trudeau implemented the Emergencies Act simply because of peaceful protest. So this is really why I think the work we're doing to engage governments is so important, because you need to have that Bitcoin ethos imbued in the people that are in the government. Because if they're fearful and they lack Bitcoiner qualities, you get things like authoritarian, totalitarian, fascist decrees and rule. But if you can imagine a government where everyone is a Bitcoiner, people are like you, like Adam Back or Michael Saylor, or these people with morals and ethics and are not fearful of everything, I believe we'll have a better world and better governance overall. Again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. Mm-hmm. Necessity is the mother of Bitcoin adoption. So you can crush your population and try to lock them up for having Bitcoin and transacting in Bitcoin and all that. But if your trading partners want Bitcoin, what are you going to do at the end of the day? We're all interconnected. We need raw materials. People buy lumber from Canada, and you buy gas and other things from other places, and you buy your goods from Asia and from China. You buy your electronics there. You buy your chips from Taiwan. If that adoption curve is steep enough, and let's say Taiwan and Canada, we all want Bitcoin for trade, what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. You're going to have to capitulate because you need to buy the thing. They don't want dollars anymore. They don't want Canadian dollars, or they don't want a CBDC. So you're going to have to open up to Bitcoin eventually. So it's the necessity that's going to make it happen. And I see us getting there simply because the dollar is dying. It looks like it's always looking like it's on its last legs for various reasons. And
perpetually.
It's just perpetually. Every morning I wake up, I'm surprised that it's still hanging on there. But all analysis points to a failure of the US dollar very, very soon. And
so I'm wondering, we touched on game theory before, and I'm curious, what does that final game theory look like? Is it some other form? I mean, like, obviously, then at that point, the Omega candle.
Well, an Omega candle is 100K, so yep. You can have a 10 Omega event, which is $1 million candle a day. And that could be enough to mark the end of fiat, right? A 10 Omega day would be the day that fiat all becomes worthless everywhere at the same time. And it's difficult for us to grasp the concept of fiat money failing very quickly because we've grown up in it. We're mostly born, most of us, I think, in Bitcoin are born post-gold standard, right? So we've never really known a world where there's not been fiat. But fiat is a recent thing, if you think about it. It's only a few decades old. It's an experiment. Bitcoin is actually old technology, if you think about it. Bitcoin is the closer thing to the original form of money, which is peer-to-peer bearer asset, maybe a gold coin, or trading items with one another. It's just going back to that. So the format is new. It's using computer science and cryptography, but the fundamental is it's valuable because two people trade directly in this instrument. So we're just going back to the basics. Fiat money is the experiment that's failing.
What is that key factor that has you thinking that, right? Because obviously people in the middle of the great financial crisis surely thought the same thing. People in the 2020 lockdown thought the same thing. So I know you've said you think that we really could be at that tipping point. And what's that key difference that is, in your mind, giving you the inclination that we're much closer than farther from it?
I'll give you two views.
Okay.
The pessimistic view is war. So people forget that in times of war, most things stop working. If there is a World War III, you're probably not going to be able to send a bank wire anywhere. That whole system just grinds to a halt. That's it. It's over. And that can trigger hyperbitcoinization and the death of fiat completely. The optimistic view is that price becomes a signal. And Bitcoin is sitting at, 0.25 M, 250K. And that starts to demonetize other assets like gold. And people just FOMO in because they want Bitcoin because everything else is not valuable anymore. That would be the better, more peaceful outcome. But I don't put it past the powers that be that they push for war in an attempt to hang on to control. Because you've seen during the COVID crisis that a crisis needs a solution, and if they can provide a solution, then they're relevant and they can maintain the control while providing that solution. So what the solution was lock everyone down and stop mobility. And that's pretty bad. So
It was very bad.
it's an excuse for control, and war is the same thing. We'll need to do certain things like have a war economy and limit mobility, limit funds, seize funds. There's all this good stuff that comes in terms of control with the war. So that would be the worst outcome, that people push for war to maintain control. The better outcome, I think, is natural market forces push Bitcoin up and thereby bring about hyper-Bitcoinization.
Cultural, moral thing? I don't know. I'm just curious what second order effect you're looking forward to seeing in the future.
I would say the biggest second order effect is we have better governance, better governments, just by imbuing them with Bitcoin. Because if you think about it, all of our rights, property rights, individual rights, even human rights, they're very weakly held and weakly granted. Just with a swift emergency act, we lost most of our rights in Canada. And it shows how thinly tied together all of this stuff is. It's held together with string and tape, and it can be destroyed. The best way to ensure that we actually have property rights is to give people Bitcoin, because that can't be taken from you. It's in your head. If you keep it with a custodian, yes, it can be taken from you. But if you have Bitcoin itself, no one can take that from you, unless through violent coercion. But that's a different story, I think. But if you can make the governments understand this, because now they have Bitcoin personally, and then maybe the government mines Bitcoin, I think we'll see a better world in which property rights are more respected. Because the current norm and the current understanding of how things work is not the right way. There's a tendency to take from other people and control people. But with self-sovereignty, I think we will beget more sovereignty for everyone because they understand it now.